Advantage for the Alexandrians, Caesar, with a Rhodian ship full of skillful sailors, emerged victorious.
And just think how things could have gone differently. But for one chance. There are a lot of those throughout history.
With help from the Allied ships, Caesar's victory enabled him to push the Egyptians back and secure the lighthouse. Gaining control of Pharos Island sent the Alexandrians into the sea and swimming back to the city. However, Caesar's fortification of the island didn't last long. The enemy regrouped and were set to storm the island. Panic-stricken, in spite of Caesar's encouragement, many of his men then fled their posts, either by ship or jumping into the sea. Caesar attempted to retreat, but Port Eunostos' harbor was overrun with enemy ships, preventing escape. Reportedly, Caesar gathered his papers and leapt overboard in an attempt to swim to an Allied ship farther out. Historian Cassius Dio claimed that Caesar would have drowned if he hadn't been able to remove his purple garment. Still, he managed to swim the distance and survive. The Alexandrians recovered the cloak and used it as a trophy to commemorate the Roman debacle. Unhappy with Ganymedes and wanting their king restored, the Alexandrians approached Caesar with a compromise. Caesar agreed to release Ptolemy XIII after entreating him to spare the kingdom and remain loyal to Rome. Once freed, however, the king defied the agreement and continued the war. By this time, a faithful ally of Caesar's, Mithridates, arrived in Egypt, clashing with Ptolemy's troops at Pelusium. Outnumbering the enemy, Mithridates secured the region between Pelusium and Alexandria. Ptolemy, warned of Caesar's ally marching on Alexandria, sent his troops to prevent passage over the river. Mithridates warned Caesar in time, and the two groups confronted the armies of Ptolemy in the Delta. In the Battle of the Nile, the Romans gained the upper hand, sending the Egyptians fleeing. In the tumult and panic, King Ptolemy XIII drowned in the Nile.
Hold down L3.
After the siege ended, Cleopatra VII married her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, enabling her to reign over Egypt until 30 BCE. Under her rule, Alexandria settled into its position within the Roman Empire and eventually surpassed Athens as one of the most important cities in the Roman Empire. Julius Caesar remained in Egypt for a short time. He and Cleopatra would later have a son named Caesarion.
Been funny to see Sinu land on Julius Caesar's arm. So this is Ptolemy, the Cleopatra's brother, the 13th.
Welcome to Introduction to Alexandria. After conquering Egypt in 331 BCE, Alexander the Great decided to build a new city, which, as per his habit, he named after himself. After his death, Alexandria quickly became the capital city of the Ptolemaic kingdom and the most important city of the Greek world.
He founded a lot of Alexandrias, and all of them were to place his mark upon the places that he basically conquered. The one in Egypt was just one of many.
The city was built between the Mediterranean Sea and Lake Mareotis, which resulted in Alexandria becoming a crucial cultural hub and trading center.
Thank you for watching. Going through the discovery tour of Egypt for Assassin's Creed Origins. And it's pretty interesting.
Sumptuous buildings could be seen wherever one turned their gaze. The royal palaces, the many temples, the gymnasium, lush public gardens, and large avenues.
And you see some of the designs for Alexandria right here. How it looked back then. A large port.
With its incomparable beauty and advantageous geographic location, Alexandria attracted foreigners, intellectuals, and traders. One of the most cosmopolitan cities of the ancient world, Alexandria supplanted even Athens as the most important Greek city in history. Egyptian obelisks were highly prized by Roman architects. While Roman design previously favored the use of a single monument, Egyptian obelisks tended to come in pairs and were generally located at the entrance of temples. Several ancient Egyptian obelisks are still in existence today, though many are spread out across the world in locations such as Paris, Rome, New York, and London. All of this shows that Alexandria was significantly influenced by the rich past of Egypt. Alexandria had several main streets. Its most famous artery was the Canopic Way. It was lined with sumptuous buildings, houses, and temples, and was roughly 8 kilometers in length. This street was one of the most important shipping entrances to Alexandria, and often hosted processions and festivals.
And you can see by the drawing it was huge. A quick way to move your troops around, especially in a large city like this. I'm gonna get there by the time the horse catches up.
The width of the street, 30 meters, was abnormally large even by Greek standards. This is likely because the Canopic Way was made in a short span of time and based on an urban plan, as opposed to being slowly built over time, as was usual for the era. The Canopic Way originated in the western cemeteries, skirted the gymnasium, and then exited the city to head east through massive doorways towards Canopus. This structure was known as the Canopic Door.
And I think they captured it rather well. There's a lot of people you can play as. Yeah, the economic role, and it had a huge role with Egypt. Egypt, Greece, and Rome, for that matter. Since Alexandria was always considered the Egyptian city. Not Egyptian, but the Greek city. And turn around. More Greek than Egyptian.
Welcome to Alexandria, a commercial hub. The ports of Alexandria were a major commercial hub, effectively connecting Egypt with the Mediterranean regions and beyond. A tremendous amount of materials and goods flowed through the city on a daily basis. The large port market was called the Emporion. It was there that merchandise was traded by the ship owners, called Nakliros. Food and other artisan work streamed out of Egypt. Ceramics, glass, golden rings, and minted coinage. The local potters, using traditional Egyptian techniques, competed with those from abroad, and the textile industry flourished. What Egypt did not produce itself was acquired through trade, using local resources such as wheat and papyrus. Most sought after was pine wood from Syria, iron and marble from the Greek islands, gold from Spain, and exotic fruits from Europe. All this commercial activity contributed to the already decadent wealth of the city.
The interesting thing about that is gold being traded is not unusual for ancient Egypt. Egypt had more silver than gold, so in an interesting term, silver was more valuable. Actually, I think it's the other way around. They didn't have as much silver. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I don't remember the exact numbers. What I do know is that silver was more valuable than gold in ancient Egypt. And you see that with their deities as well. The description of the deities is that the skin of the gods was gold, and their bones were made of silver. To show the importance of the two metals, with the silver being the backbone, the more valuable. The bones of the gods. And again, gold being their skin. Remember right, I think now that they did have more gold, so they could more easily trade it. Silver was harder for them to find. Although I need to research that again. Again, what I remember is the value of silver in ancient Egypt. What that is. There's these small lights that appear on the ground.
The wood imported to Port Mareotis through Alexandria's seaward ports was used in the nearby shipyards, where most of Egypt's ships were built. Employing tens of thousands of shipbuilders, the shipyards contributed to establishing the Egyptian fleet as one of the mightiest of the era. Any wood not used in shipbuilding was further disseminated through Egypt for various purposes.
Yeah, to a degree, this is the discovery tour of it. So it's just an interesting side note to it, where they explore Egypt itself and all the things that went into making the game. Exploring Egypt and the various cities and life within Egypt. But I might do a new game plus.
The southern port of Lake Mareotis was the biggest in Alexandria. Save for a branch angling westward, the lake's size in the Ptolemaic era was roughly 40 to 50 kilometers from north to south. Its waters were maintained by a steady runoff from the Nile. In addition to the lake, a man-made canal was created to assist in the transfer of goods from the city to the port using barges, though it is not represented in the game due to its size.
Yeah, there's only so much they can do in these games. Even now, they can't really make a one-to-one. And one-to-one, I mean, 1 mile equals 1 mile, 1 foot equals 1 foot. They have to do some adjustments.
Banking was one of the most distinctive innovations brought by the Greeks to Egypt. The centerpiece of Alexandria's wealth was the royal systematization of taxes on almost everything. Basic items such as salt, oil, beer, wheat, and linen were heavily taxed. As a result, the royal treasury of Alexandria was able to ensure the economic stability of most of the administrative areas of Egypt.
Basically taxing the staples of life.
By the late 12th century, the channel feeding the lake from the Nile silted up. Lake Mareotis lost its connection to the Mediterranean, as well as most of its water, as the lake slowly evaporated to a fraction of its former size. In modern times, Lake Mareotis is being kept alive through irrigation. However, only about 17% of its original size remains.
Which, when you think about it, is a dramatic loss. Or a dramatic reduction. Ptolemy soldier, or Ptolemy soldier. Sometimes I accidentally pronounce the P. And now entertainment.
Welcome to Alexandria, City of Celebration. Like most Greek cities, Alexandria offered multiple forms of entertainment. Most were related to cults, religious practices, and the festivities surrounding those practices. Among those festivities, the most important ones were the dynastic celebrations, instituted in honor of the deified Ptolemaic kings and queens. These celebrations could go on for many days and included sacrifices, offerings, processions, and public banquets.
And cult here is not used in the way that a lot of people think of it now. This could be cult of personality, I suppose you could say, or religious. Which religious, it sounds like it might be the same, but it's not. It's literal religion, or a little faith. So you might say Apollo, for example. Doesn't necessarily mean as how people consider some of the crazy cults now. For example, Far Cry 5. It's not that type of cult.
Games and competitions were organized whenever possible in locations such as the stadium, the hippodrome, and the gymnasium. The residents of Alexandria favored such events where athletes, poets, and musicians from Egypt and other cities of the Greek world competed.
They borrowed a lot from the Greeks. That you see a lot of culture shifting both ways between the Greeks and the Egyptians. And then both of them influencing the Rome and back and forth. There's a lot of trading in culture and trade of ideas between those three places.
Like all good Greek cities, Alexandria had a theater. The architecture of this structure is Roman in style. This is because the team duplicated a theater from Cyrene. Roman theaters were usually semicircular and built from scratch on a flat area with structures designed to enhance oration. Greek theaters were more oblong in shape, similar to a horseshoe, and favored the slopes of natural hills to support their acoustics.
And you go through a couple of missions in this theater, and tied with it early on in the game when you're traveling through Alexandria, and you eventually go back there later for some later quests.
At the theater, one could witness the plays of contemporary comic and tragic authors. The play you are witnessing below is Menander's Dyskolos, more commonly known as the Grouch, a late and popular entry in the Greek comedies.
And masks were common in these plays.
Εγώ συλλέξω. Ήκενται οικία τέχε σύζυγος, ολιγούσα ή, μετά της τέχνης, μετά των δραχμές. Οή, τον δυστυχή.
They're going to repeat it fairly soon. Well, maybe not. These should also be in different parts of the play. And then education. This one being the model for a Greek woman. Greek girl.
Welcome to Education in Alexandria. The education of young Alexandrians did not differ from the one generally dispensed elsewhere in ancient Greece. At the age of 7, the child was taken in charge by a tutor, who then became responsible for instilling an elementary education as well as good moral principles. Teaching was generally done outside, in the open air. In the gymnasium, students were taught not only sports, but also topics such as rhetoric, philosophy, music, and poetry. All things deemed essential to one's education at the time.
Well, it should be interesting to a lot of people. Just look in rooms.
Here, both girls and boys are shown attending a class given by one of the rhetoricians of the era. The team made the choice to show both genders attending class within the context of the game world. Even though it is historically inaccurate, the team felt it was not necessary to prioritize historical sexism over inclusive gameplay.
Yeah, I guess this wouldn't have happened right here. And I can see why they did it. It's just strange. There would have been a difference in position as well, depending upon what type of family you're in and where you are as well, city versus out in the country. So there are differences there too. This is the model for a Greek man.
Welcome to the Great Library of Alexandria. Near the district of royal palaces and within the Mouseion was the most famous library of all antiquity. The Library of Alexandria was built to house all of human knowledge. At its pinnacle, the library was believed to contain over 700,000 parchments.
This being how the library was expected to look like, or thought to look like, with the stadium being right next to it. Or the amphitheater.
Throughout the centuries, fires and wars between Christianity and paganism destroyed the library, leaving nothing behind. The loss of the building, and more importantly, its vast collection, is immeasurable. As no descriptions are available, the team's rendition of the Library of Alexandria was inspired by the visuals of the Library of Chalcis at Ephesus.
This is in Ephesus right here. But that was a great loss to lose the Library in Alexandria. Oh, the great library.
While much of the collection was purchased at the government's expense, the library also obtained books through other means. Any books owned by travelers coming through the city were seized to be copied for the library. The copy would then be returned to the owner, and the original entered into the library's collection.
Which sounds a bit draconian. And brings new meaning to the word seizing knowledge.
Alexandria offered unrivaled intellectual and cultural attractions. Eminent scholars from Athens, Rhodes, and other Greek centers traveled to the city to learn and engage with other free thinkers. Both the Mouseion and the library were at the center of groundbreaking ideas and creative expression. The great minds of antiquity were usually well versed in many disciplines, which were often associated to specific schools of thought. The Peripatetics, the Stoics, and the Cynics were among the most well-known schools of the time. It is clear that Alexandria lived up to its fundamental role as a city for intellectuals, nurturing many great minds whose impact reverberates through our modern world.
And you see some of that now when you call someone a cynic, for example, or say that a person is stoic.
Hypatia of Alexandria was a Greek mathematician, philosopher, astronomer, and inventor. Though born in Greece, she eventually migrated to Alexandria, like many great minds of the time. It is there that she became the head of the Neoplatonist school of Alexandria. From most accounts, she was highly respected by her fellow Alexandrians, both as a teacher and a philosopher. With her death, the age of great ancient scientific discoveries came to an end. Callimachus was born in Cyrene and educated in Athens. After his studies, he moved to Alexandria to work in the Great Library. A poet and a critic, he strongly rejected the epic format of Homeric poems, and instead fervently supported a shorter, more judiciously formulated style of poetry. His epigrams and elegiac poems were emulated by later poets. His work was extremely popular, second only to Homer's own works. It was in Alexandria that mathematician Euclid, the father of geometry, wrote the Elements, laying out the foundational work of what would become modern algebra and number theory. Euclidean geometry would become one of the most influential systems in the evolution of mathematics.
Hi, and thanks for watching. And going through the discovery tour for Assassin's Creed Origins on the discovery of Egypt, basically.
How do you calculate the circumference of the Earth with a camel, 2 sticks, and shadows cast by the sun? This is what Eratosthenes of Cyrene described in his principal work, Geography, while he was director of the Great Library of Alexandria. He is credited for the invention of the armillary spear around 250 BCE.
I wonder if they're going to go into the Antikytherian mechanism in this as well, or is it... That'd be mostly in Greece. Probably not.
The earliest known and most complete armillary sphere of antiquity was the Meteoroscopion of Alexandria, with an imposing 9 rings compared to globes. Known as the zodiac krikatoi amongst the Greeks, the Meteoroscopion was used to determine the location of celestial bodies around the Earth. Every self-respecting astronomer of antiquity would have sought to use this tool to better understand the celestial movements. Pythagoras of Samos was a well-known and respected philosopher and mathematician. He is best known for the Pythagorean theorem. However, there is proof that the theorem existed in Babylonia and India long before Pythagoras was born, casting some doubts as to who exactly originated the theorem.
Should have enough time for this. Maybe 1 or 2 more. And next is a noblewoman, a Greek noblewoman. And you see a drastic difference in the attire. In Call of Duty? No, I'm sorry, I haven't.
Welcome to the Mouseion of Alexandria.
Or I did a long time ago when it first came out. It's been a while.
The Mouseion was a sector of the city commissioned by Ptolemy I to rival Athens' Academy as an institute of intellectual pursuit. Dedicated to the 9 inspiring muses, the Mouseion became a great center for philosophical and scientific enlightenment. It welcomed scholars from many kingdoms, inviting them to share knowledge in literature, science, and geography.
This being the non-muses. On the bottom, that is.
The Mouseion was designed so that its buildings and grounds would accommodate free thinking, debate, and presentation. Meeting spaces and theaters surrounded a main courtyard. Expansive gardens were filled with exotic plants that aided in the study and supply of herbs and medicines. A zoo offered the study of animal behavior and physiology. Also among the Moseon's many star attractions was its astronomical observatory. Herophilus was a physician who lived most of his life in Alexandria. He was able to perform the dissection of human cadavers on a large scale, due to the permissiveness of the city in such matters. Among many other discoveries, he learned that the brain was central to the human nervous system. He also extensively mapped the blood system and measured the pulse with the aid of a water clock. It is reported that in his thirst to understand human anatomy, he performed 600 vivisections on live prisoners.
One good reason to not commit crime.
In order to be free to pursue their research, scholars were fed and housed at the Moseon at the government's expense. This freedom provided Alexandria scholars a meeting space for intellectual pursuits and a haven for spiritual peace. Though nothing remains of the original Moseon, it lives on as the legacy of our modern museums.
Ακίκον πάση. Προσφορέαν αρτοκόπου θεομνίστου απολάβου. Βρει του κάλικα σημό.
Next, Greek nobleman.
Welcome to the Serapion of Alexandria. In a city of numerous magnificent attractions, the Serapion was considered to be the most beautiful temple of Alexandria. Located southwest of the city, on a small hill known as the Acropolis, the sanctuary was constructed during the reign of Ptolemy III, upon foundations which had existed since the reign of Ptolemy I Soter.
Which you can see the older design. Let's see, they can only display a small portion of it due to scaling.
Visitors of the Serapion climbed 100 steps to reach the courtyard. Libraries were installed in the porticos surrounding the square building, with its roof and columns adorned with gold and gilded bronze. Pharaohs were generous to the temple, as were several Roman emperors after Egypt's conquest. An inner temple housed the statue of Serapis, dedicated to healing the sick. Since the 26th dynasty, Greeks in Egypt had gradually integrated the Egyptian cult of the Apis bull to their own rituals. With the establishment of the Ptolemaic dynasty, the cult of Apis was further integrated into Greek religion. During his rule, Ptolemy I chose to merge Egyptian and Hellenic gods into a syncretic divinity named Serapis. This name was the result of the amalgamation of Osiris and Apis. With this new deity, the Ptolemaic dynasty managed to accommodate similar belief sets for two different cultures, bringing about a new dynastic cult.
As we find out about the origin of Serapis, which plays a role in the game.
Serapis was also associated to other deities, including Asclepius, a Greek god of healing. It is possible that, as with the Serapis Temple of Canopus, the sick would visit this sanctuary, sleeping there overnight in the hopes of being healed within its hallowed halls.
I have just enough time for one more. 7 minutes. Too long. Maybe 2 more, depending upon how these go. But this one right here is against the law to kill the cat. And punishment for that could be death. Switch characters again. This time a Roman soldier.
Welcome to the Panean. The Panean was a temple built in honor of the god Pan, divinity of nature. This Greek god, often represented as a half-man, half-goat, with a beard, horns, and goat's hooves, was considered the protector of shepherds and herds.
When you see him later on in other literature, especially in Midsummer Night's Dream.
Pan's attribute was his namesake musical instrument, the pan flute. His temples were usually located in caves and on high mountains, and were frequented by shepherds. It is likely that Mediterranean cults adopted the imagery of Pan to symbolize the Christian devil. To give proper honor to the god, Alexandrians built an artificial hill upon which they housed his temple to compensate for the flat relief of the city. The artificial mound had the shape of a spinning top or a pine cone, which was accessed by a spiral staircase. The top had a panoramic view of the entire city. Only such heights would be fitting for a mountain god.
And this is what they refer to right here. And the view is pretty nice. But that's as much time as I have for the moment. The next time I stream this, I'll be picking up with the tours. There's 2 more in Alexandria, and then I'll be moving outside of it. And you can see there are tours all over the place. So I'll be traveling throughout the entire map. This is an interesting timeline. Not as detailed as I thought it would be. Maybe this is opened up later on and expanded on later on. Those are the passports, the tours, map. I'll try to stream later on tonight as well. The original Assassin's Creed is on the PC, so it's a little bit different than actually streaming it from the PS4, but I should be able to get it working. So thank you for watching, and that is it for now.